our goal is not to get our fair share of business, right? If we want our fair share of business, this is not the game to play anymore. And this is the biggest, I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that investors make. And I think it's one of the biggest fallacies that they believe when they read a lot of these things out there, is that you can just go buy a property, put it on Airbnb, and you're going to make money. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Moore. We're back with Whiskey Wednesday, and my main man, Dave. Dude, we missed Dave Savolich. There we go. All right. If you see,
we're not perfect.
We're not perfect.
It just proves it. Right
as
there.
Much as we tell ourselves we are, we're not.
And these
all right, guys.
These aren't edited.
Don't start like taking it off the rails right out of the gate. These guys are listening. Let's not lose them 5 minutes, like 30 seconds in. Let's right? Go. All right, guys. We're back. We're gonna get serious. We don't edit these, so you had to deal with our missed fist pump on YouTube, but we got it back. We're back in action. So, guys, these are our short, sweet, to the point episodes. We're going to talk about a little bit about what's going on in our world, some short-term rental topics that Dave and Jake put together. So we're going to, tell me get my opinion on those things, and then we're going to answer some questions that you guys send in. So if you have questions, always send them in to support@vodacy.com. We'll make sure we answer them on an upcoming episode. So what do we got today? What are we talking about?
Well, first of all, you said Dave and Jake. So
I know we got you're losing the producer. You're losing the producer to Jake.
And Jake is our content manager here at Vodacy. He's helping us out with some topics and different things. So excited to have him part of the agenda,
part of the team. So, I know you're we're raising the bar on the producer side and everything else. So I mean, now you're just talent.
Yeah.
And so, don't get an attitude like some talent does.
All right. Well, agenda today, we're going to talk about some short-term rental stats. Okay. We're going to jump into some trends and, kind of some thoughts and things that AirDNA is kind of thinking about RevPAR. And then I got a couple questions that I'm going to kind of try to stump the guru, Shawn Moore.
All right. Let's see if we can get stumped. All right.
EO. So, okay. All right. Let's talk. Stats. These come from the USA Today.
Okay.
Currently, short-term rental represents $64 billion market and 2.4 million properties. That's pretty impressive. Yeah. Next decade, it's poised to go from 64 billion to 81 billion. That's awesome. So right there, if you're an investor, if you're thinking about the future of short-term rentals, over the next 10 years, it's going to, grow, hopefully by 17 billion or so.
Yeah.
That 17 billion is way harder to get than the first, 64 billion. I mean, it's hard to grow billions and billions and billions. So,
for sure.
So that's an interesting stat. I think that's good. Second of all, natural disasters created some headwinds in the short-term rental world this past year or two. California, Canada, Hawaii had pretty significant fires, which caused some challenges in vacation in general, not just short-term rentals. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the southern U.S. with hurricanes. But I also think that you can't control that. You can't predict that. Next year, we may not have fires in those areas. We may not have hurricanes. I mean, so if you're a short-term rental investor and does that concern you? Are you scared of that? Or do you just continue to do business as usual and let's keep investing in some of those areas?
Yeah. I mean, those areas are always susceptible to those natural disasters, right? There's certain areas that are more susceptible to wildfires. There are certain areas that are more susceptible to hurricanes. And it's an inherent risk when you build a home, live in those areas, invest as a short-term rental investor. So those, I'll be honest, I live in the mountains in Utah. I'm not used to a lot of natural disasters. We're not susceptible. We do have wildfires here, but they do a lot of mitigation. They do a lot of clear cutting and things like that. So we don't have those crazy wildfires that you sometimes hear about in some other areas that don't do that. And going down to hurricane, you go to those hurricane areas, it does scare me a little bit, personally, right? I'm not used to them. I'm not when I hear about them, I see the devastation that comes from them. You go to talk to somebody that lives in those areas, they're like, what are you worried about? They come through every single year.
Just happens.
Sometimes they hit the area that you're in, you deal with it and they move on. And I'm like, man, it seems kind of crazy to me. Right. And it does, and I think that maybe where the headwinds are coming is, maybe you have investors that are not used to those types of areas and they're not mitigating that risk as well as they should with the insurance policies that they're putting in place, or like not planning on loss of revenue when something like that comes in. And those are things that you have to mitigate along the way and really look at when you're underwriting those deals. And that's part of the underwriting process. If you're going to buy in those areas, you got to consider it. You have to really consider it, right? And for somebody like me personally, it does scare me a little bit. Yeah. Like when because I'm not used to it. There's areas that people that live in those areas, they're like, it doesn't bother them really that much at all. And they just, they plan for it. They mitigate with their insurance policies and everything else. And so I think that it's, something you have to think about. And there's certain areas that, like you said, maybe they don't hit the same area, but hurricanes come through every single year, right? Yeah. There's a hurricane season for a reason.
Right.
And wildfires happen out west every single year in certain areas, right? And some are more devastating than others. And we have to think about that. And naturally, some of those areas that we like to invest in, that we like to vacation in, are going to be susceptible to some of those natural disasters. And we got to mitigate it with the insurance policies and then decide whether we're going to move forward or not. Or if you're as an investor, you can't mitigate every risk.
Right.
You're never going to be able to get to a point where all risks are completely mitigated and you have nothing, you're not risking anything. And so it's, as an investor, you have to decide what that risk tolerance is, how you're going to mitigate it, what areas you're going to invest in. And you have to make that decision yourself as you're moving, because a lot of these areas are really profitable areas because a lot of people like to visit them. And so they happen to be like, the revenue that you can generate there can be significant because a lot of people like to visit the beaches that a lot of those hurricanes come through, right? Yeah. And so we have to think about it, and you're never going to mitigate it completely. We talked a little bit about it on a previous episode, and we won't dive into all the insurance stuff, but that's when we talked in detail about the insurance policies and what you should be thinking about and what you should be having in there when it comes to operating in the short-term rental world to help you mitigate that risk should something like that happen, so that it's not financially devastating, right?
Right. Well, and I think it's personal risk too. You have to decide what your personal tolerance is to risk. If you're not very, a risk taker, you're averse to risk, you're probably thinking, man, I don't know if I want to buy down in that area. But it's interesting. We, during the hurricane season, we had members that were closing on properties all day long in Florida, and they were so excited because they're used to it, and they already have properties in Florida, and like, oh yeah, I'm closing, and I can't wait to get this up and running because I know the potential, and we're going to take our chances.
And they know the build quality to look for. They know the build style to look for. Like they understand that stuff, and they're walking into it with their eyes wide open, making the best decisions they can to build that portfolio that's going to withstand some of those of those storms and some of those things that are happening.
One of our members was building, and the second level was just about to be framed out in wood during the hurricane, not in a hurricane area, but in a coastal area, and they changed and said, we're going all cement, all cinder block.
The whole thing.
Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. I mean, it added a little bit of cost, but they were like, we won't have to worry as much because, we don't have to worry about that, the wood and the water and stuff like that. So interesting. So, all right. Okay, so I'm going to get Shawn's thoughts on this.
Okay.
This is from AirDNA. Per AirDNA's report, the flood of newcomers in the short-term rental market only served to dilute the market and lower profits, giving rise to the social media coined term AirBnBUST. For the first time since 2014, the RevPAR decreased by 4.9%, and short-term rental growth slowed to 6.7 year over year. So it still grew 6.7 over the year before, but it slowed a little bit. So maybe tell them about what RevPAR is, and what do you think about RevPAR decreased almost 5%? And what do you think about AirBnBUST?
I think that it's 100% true. The flood of newcomers has diluted the profitability as far as RevPAR. What people have to understand about RevPAR, to me, RevPAR is about the least important metric that I look at as an investor. Period. RevPAR means, okay, there's this much money being spent. There's this many homes. We're going to divide that much money by that many homes, and that's how much people are making per available rental. That's what it stands for. Rental revenue per available unit, right? So that's all you're doing is what your RevPAR is your fair share of business, right? If everybody got the same slice of pie, that's going to be your slice of the pie. Well, as inventory goes up, as supply goes up, more homes hit the market, your inventory or your supply, your fair share of that business is going to go down. So your piece of the pie is getting smaller. That is, any time that you have a mainstream asset that becomes popular and more people get into the market, more investors buy properties in those areas, then all of a sudden your RevPAR is going to go down. Our goal is not to get our fair share of business, right? If we want our fair share of business, this is not the game to play anymore. And this is the biggest, I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that investors make. And I think it's one of the biggest fallacies that they believe when they read a lot of these things out there, is that you can just go buy a property, put it on Airbnb, and you're going to make money. It's easy to make money, because there was a period of time that was true. Everybody's RevPAR, everybody's fair share of business actually paid the bills, actually made money. Right. And it was that post-COVID era when the supply and demand gap was huge in our business, right? Supply and demand has shrunk, right? So we've got a lot more supply in the market. Demand continues to go up. What did you just say the USA Today numbers were? Like 60-something billion dollars? $64 billion in the US market. The US market accounts for about 37% of the global market. The global market's running and growing just as fast as the US market. The global market I saw by 2034, the next 10 years, is supposed to be at a $312 billion market. Wow. So if a $64 billion market grew by 6.4% and it didn't grow by 15% that it was before, is that a bad thing? Like, that's still a big market growing at almost 7%. So what that's telling you too is there's a lot of money still being spent in the market. So as an investor, if you're hoping to get that you're just going to put up, and this is why I say RevPAR is, I guess it's a really good stat to look at if your goal is just to buy a property, throw it on Airbnb, and get your fair share of business, right? If that's what you want to do, things aren't looking good for you. The stats aren't looking good for you, because your fair share of business continues to go down. Now, if you're willing to go figure out what it takes to get your unfair share of business, it's a pretty exciting game to play, because that next stat that you just showed of 6 or 7% growth on $64 billion is a lot of dang money. Mm-hmm. And so you're saying, okay, how can I go get my fair share or unfair share of that business? And you have to understand how to play the game, right? The money is made at the top of the market, period. We've been saying this. I've been saying it for the last year and a half. And that everybody is focusing on their fair share of business. That's not where the money's made. Your money is made in the top 10, or even if you can be in the top 15% of a market, you've got a chance to make money. But everybody in the middle of the market, everybody in the bottom of the market, which is 80% of the market. So while these articles are written, and they're absolutely true, is there's a lot of headwinds. There's a lot of people that aren't making money, is because they don't understand how to get their fair share of business. I always call it I started talking about the slaughter of the short-term rental lambs, because what I mean by that is there's a lot of people that have very little experience, have no understanding of how to operate in the top 10 or 15% of the market, showing people and telling them you should just go in, and what they're doing is showing them numbers of how they performed during that period of time where everybody was making money. Everybody looked like a genius. So what they're doing is showing numbers from that period of time, sort of, in my opinion, misleading investors of saying that, hey, this is how the game is still played, and you can go in and get your fair share of business and make money. That's not the case. Right. So is the Airbnb bust a real thing? I would argue yes. I've argued
for some people,
for a lot of people, it is. The Airbnb bust is a real thing for 80% of the market. For those people that are willing to operate in the top of the market, totally different game, totally different conversation. You talk to those people, they're making a lot of money. There's a lot of opportunity. There's more people coming into that market spending money. And guess what? When they have those properties that stand out, they have these unique experiences. They're able to articulate those experiences. They know how to market them, and their property stands out like a sore thumb on the good side. And everybody wants to book their property. They're getting their unfair share of business and paying all the bills, right? Yeah. And they're making the majority of the money. And this happens across every industry. Doesn't matter. Like, go talk to realtors. 5% of realtors make 95% of the money, right? And so you go talk to any industry you choose. If it's a carpet company, right? All carpet companies don't make the same amount of money. They don't get their fair share of business. In business, it's our job to go get our unfair share of business. And that's where, as investors, a common metric that people track is RevPAR, revenue per available unit. And that is that's a misleading indicator of what the potential is for you to go make if you're willing to operate better than everybody else. If you're willing to, in business, we talk about it all the time. As investors, they talk more about getting your fair share of business. And so you're kind of riding these waves. So short-term rentals are really, really fun because you treat them like a business, right? And so that's why I like them. There's levers you can pull to make more money. And so in our world, is the Airbnb bust a thing? Absolutely. Is there a lot of people that are getting absolutely killed because of the advice that they're following and is just thinking that it's an easy game to play and you can go throw it on Airbnb and you're going to make money and get your fair share of business? You will make your fair share of business, but guess what? That fair share of business is not going to cut it, and you're going to lose money on it.
Yeah,
and so,
good. That's awesome. I love the way you put that. I think that's so true. And that's the reality is it is something, but there is steps to take to get yourself in the top 20% and really take advantage of this amazing market that's going to grow in the next 10 years. Right. Like crazy.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
All right. So I got a couple questions for you. And I, for you listeners have not told him what the questions are. So let's give a little test to Shawn, see how he does. Yeah. Get a sip of whiskey, I'm
taking some whiskey before they dive into this.
So we got average daily rates per market type, according to AirDNA. So I'm going to give you 5 market types and tell me, let's make it a little easier. Give me the top 2 markets that you think are the most expensive. Okay. So
market types.
Yeah. So we have a coastal market. Okay. Beaches, things like that. Mid-sized city, mountain and lakes market, suburban, and urban metro. Which 2 of those markets do you think are the most expensive?
I would say mountain and lakes.
1. Okay. Yep. And that was, by the way, number 1. So, gosh, you really do know what you're talking about. Okay. Good job.
All right.
And second?
I feel like
don't think too hard.
I'm going with coastal.
Oh, dude, nice job. Let's go.
I felt like that was going to be a trick question because I know mountain lakes is 1, but I was like, coastal is going to be a trick, not be number 2.
Yeah. So that's spot on. So
all right.
The average daily rate for a mountain and lake is about $428 per night. So that makes sense.
Yep.
A lot of people want to go to the mountains, the high end areas and things like that. You've got a mountain property.
Expensive. Yep.
And then the second would be coastal, which is $367. And those vary depending on which state, which location you're at. The others were fairly close in the mid 200s were the mid-sized city, the suburban, and the urban metro. The least was urban metro. So, anyways, pretty interesting, pretty good. I like those. That really is what attracts most people to coastal and to mountains. Yeah. Is, that's where the money's
where we want to go.
Exactly.
We want the mountains, we want beaches.
Exactly. Okay. Next, second question type here.
Let's quit. Let's just quit right now.
No, I mean, you're on a roll,
I'm just
dude.
kidding. Go.
You're doing good.
I know. Go.
Okay.
I'm going to get them.
All right. So I have a list here of there's a lot. But I want the top 10 most expensive cities for short-term rentals as an average. So stick with the mountain lake theme. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So just as a guess, and this would be pretty hard to dial in, but
Are you talking about most expensive nightly rates?
Yeah.
Or most expensive to buy into?
No, nightly rates. So the daily rate on average for this city is $785 per night. Okay. So take a guess.
Jackson Hole.
No, but you're in the right area. I'll give you one more guess. Then
Aspen.
Oh, Vail.
Okay.
So that's the same.
All right.
Aspen and Vail, the same.
Basically the same.
So
Aspen
the number 1 was Vail, Colorado. Okay. Number 2 was right here in our backyard, Park City.
Yeah.
So, and that's interesting because a lot of people ask us about Park City, and we tell them, man, we love Park City, but it's pretty tough, because acquisition prices so high and the nightly rate.
Yeah.
And then it kind of goes down. I'll name these because I think they're interesting. Indio, California.
Okay.
So we're talking, Palm Springs and, out in that area. Rosemary Beach, Florida, Key West, Hawaii, Lahaina, Santa Rosa Beach, Palm Springs, Breckenridge, and then Port Aransas, Texas. Aransas, yeah. No, I'm not familiar with that area. So, anyways,
down by Galveston.
Several in Florida, bunch in the beach, and then the top 2 are the mountains. All right, so these ones would be possible, but let's see what you got. But these are the 10 most least expensive areas in the country. Now, we're not like talking Detroit, Michigan, and maybe some of these areas that are like we're talking inner city, areas. We're talking where
so we're not urban markets.
Yeah, we're talking where there are short-term rental properties. So the least expensive area
Let me guess. I'm guessing.
Want me to give you the state?
Yeah, state.
So the state is Texas.
Ooh, that's not the state I would have guessed.
So the least where there is some short-term rental properties. So where would you think?
Abilene.
El Paso.
El Paso. Okay.
So El Paso with a daily rate of $123. That's the average. So, and as you go in here, El Paso, Texas, Newark, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Portland, Oregon, Jacksonville, Florida, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, San Jose, California.
Large metro areas.
Albuquerque,
all
New
of those
Mexico.
are, I mean, most of those are pretty big metro areas. Like you said, the urban markets are,
Right.
I mean, they're
But
just
I think
lower.
it's good to know these areas because if you want to, the acquisition price will be way higher in areas where the nightly rate is higher, obviously.
Yeah.
And those are quality assets and quality locations. But it doesn't mean that these other markets can't be successful either.
Maybe,
Do you know what I
maybe
mean?
not.
Maybe,
right?
yeah, you got to look at the
You got to
numbers.
look at the ratio.
The acquisition price
Yeah.
will be lower. I mean, we have members that, are looking in some of these areas and pretty interesting. Did any of those surprise you or
No,
about
it
the
doesn't.
same?
Yeah, it's those urban markets. There's a lot of competition with hotels, and there's a lot of competition with even like a range of hotels from, your 4 and 5 star hotels all the way down to your, the cheaper hotels. And so, you've got a lot of competition there. There's a lot of supply. Depending on what people are coming in for, the urban markets don't surprise me. They've just not been. The urban markets have been, since COVID, have taken a dive. They've also been really highly regulated. And so they're not those destination markets and not the short-term rentals have to be destination markets, but the ratios typically don't work out as well either.
Right. And I would say too, just because you don't know of an area or a place, there's lots of areas that, you may never heard of.
You got to check them out.
Yeah. And you got to run the numbers because a lot of those areas may not be destination locations, but there's some sort of attraction or draw, like college towns, small areas that people
Event
are coming
centers.
into. Exactly. Where there's events and there's things to do in that area, whether they come for college event or a motorcycle race or a event or a marathon or some sort of activity that, St. George, Utah, it's a kind of a tough market right now, but a lot of things happen in that town. They have the marathon, they have the Ironman comes there, they have the World Senior Games, they have the national parks. And so, as you look at areas, consider those. But as we always tell everybody, look at the numbers.
Yeah, the numbers will paint the picture, right? Yeah. And that the first numbers you look at is the ratio between the acquisition price and the revenue potential. And that can tell you a lot about the investability of a market within 10 minutes of pulling all those numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, that's it for today. I want you to know you did really good on the quizzes and the tests. And it just proved, proved that you really know what you're doing because I didn't tell you.
You didn't tell me any of this. Nope. All right. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's good. So, I like passing the test, right? It's good to pass the test once in a while. I get a little nervous, it's kind of starting to sweat and had to have a drink of the whiskey. It is Whiskey Wednesday though, so I'm allowed, right? Yep. Okay, so we'll wrap up. You guys that join us, we always appreciate your time. We know how valuable it is, and we appreciate you spending it with us. And at the end of every episode, we ask them 2 favors. And that the first one is, if you got any value out of this, if you know somebody else that would get value out of this, share the show. If you think they'd like to be a part of these conversations, we're going to do our best to make sure that we're talking about relevant topics that you guys would be interested in, walking into this short-term rental game with your eyes wide open so that you can do everything you can to raise the bar and continue to succeed with your assets or an asset that you're considering buying. And then the final thing and the most important thing that I ask you at the end of every episode is pick that one thing you can do today to start building that life you don't want to take a vacation from. Cheers, my friends.
Cheers.
About choked on that one. Cheers, friends.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. Share this with other people you think need to hear about it. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Hey Grace, is there a website?
Yes! For more amazing content and expert advice, visit Vodacy.com.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.